welcome Raj to the center of the screen to give this speech, my reflections on what's happening in the world. Raj.
So there's so much happening in the world right now, and we're all a part of it, and we're all facing everything that's happening in our own way. Whether we're working, whether we're with families, friends, we're traveling, we're all having to face a situation. And so I thought that it would be a good time to share my reflections and a couple of stories that I have that come to my mind as this is all unfolding. So good afternoon, fellow Toastmasters and guests, and thank you, Table Topics Master. So when all this stuff is happening in the world with COVID and the coronavirus, it takes me back to stories that I've heard from my family, especially my grandparents, and also stories from my father. And so from what it looks like to me and what it comes to me is that there's something big that always happens in each generation. And my grandparents had to face something big in their generation. My father did too. And this is the first time that I'm facing something big in my time where I'm a great contribution to the world. And so I remember that back in the days, this was when my grandmother used to share stories about my father and their time back in the village in India. And what was happening around this was around, I think about 60 years ago, where there was a big separation of India. So this is when Pakistan and India were split apart, and our family were in a village in the center of that. So that was a very, very horrific time and very sort of monumental time for a lot of things to change in people's lives there. My grandfather had to protect the village. He had to protect his own family. And similar to what we're doing, staying inside, they all had to stay inside because if anyone went outside, there was a big chance for them to be murdered or killed. And that was because of the big separation that was happening of the two countries. And so reflecting on that, there was so much that my grandfather and my grandmother had to do so their children, including my dad and his siblings, would stay alive. That was really what it was about. It was about staying alive and keeping alive. And I noticed that, and it was from my grandmother's stories where my grandfather would walk outside of his house, and when he would come back with, I don't want to say it, but blood all over his sword. And they didn't have fire weapons or anything like that. So he would come back with blood, and that was just, he had to be that part and commit those type of things to protect his village and protect his family. Otherwise, it would have caused problems for them. And so that was my from my grandmother's stories. And the second part I noticed was from my dad. He had his own thing. So he was a child when my grandfather was having to face all those things. But then in his time, he had the recession. Now, the recession happened in 2000, and I think it was around, the big part of it was around 2005, 2006 and 7, where he had his own business and he had to do so much to make sure the business would thrive and survive. And when I was a child, I used to see him. He would spend time after time, day after day, and basically get up really early in the morning, sleep really late at night, and market his products. So he used to manufacture Australian-made lounges. And so what he would do is he would throw those lounges in a truck. He would take me when I was a kid, and we would travel all around the outback into privately owned businesses, and we would take our lounges out and sell it to them. And he was a great salesperson. But what happened with the recession is that people stopped buying Australian-made products. And so when they stopped buying Australian-made products, his business went down, and I could see my dad trying to protect his family financially. So this time it wasn't protecting it from people trying to destroy his family. He was really trying to protect his family so that he could bring in some income so we can continue eating, continue buying things, continue going to school. And so I was thinking about that. And so my grandfather had to go through his thing, and my dad has to go through his own thing to protect the family. And now we're in a position where I'm now an adult and I'm contributing to the world, and now I'm having to do the same thing in this big pandemic that's come up. And it's amazing. So right now, I'm not having to protect my family or anyone else from people killing each other, or I don't have financial issues right now. But we've got other things like toilet paper concerns and moisturizer, and we can't, buy enough toilet paper because there's so many people around Woolies and all that stuff. But now it's around staying at home and protecting ourselves and just being cautious about how we take care of ourselves outside of the world. And so the one thing that really stood out for me throughout my grandfather, my dad, and what we're going through right now is responsibility and taking full responsibility. So my grandfather took full responsibility in his time. My dad also did in his time. And now it's my responsibility to make sure that we take the right steps to keep ourselves safe and thrive in this situation. So on the other end, we come out clean. So making sure that if they say don't go out, don't go out. Making sure that I attend all my meetings for work, try to stay employed. And the big part of it is that there are people outside, they're feeling disconnected because we're physically not there close to each other. But we can still stay connected. So ensuring that I pick up the phone and make that call to someone when they're in need. And people will do that for me as well. So that's a big part that I take from it. And it's really around responsibility, that now we're adults and I take that full responsibility as much as I can so I can contribute back to the world. Thank you, Table Topics Master.
Thank you very much, Raj.